Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockers Club. I've got something new from Terra Master. Well, I just finished the review for this one. This is the D4-300. It's got 5 bays. And the new one down here that I haven't opened yet, this is the D4-300. So we have a D5-300 and a D4-300. So you might think, well, the D4-300 is just a 4-bay version. Just take one bay off there. And you have the D4-300. Well, that's not quite the case. And we will see that here in just a moment. So let me get the box open. This here is usually the box that has, your power brick, USB cable, fasteners to secure the hard drives, 2 little hard drive trays, and there's usually a quick start guide, warranty information. Yep. So necessary stuff, but not real exciting. So this here is what everything is all about. So this is the D4-300. And if we look at the two side by side, or we compare the two, this is the D5-300. So you can see that the cases, the external shells here, are the same. So they have the same footprint, and if we look at the backs, they are pretty much identical. Dual cooling fans on both units, and the same USB interface. So the only thing that's really different externally is the fact that we see 4 bays here and 5 bays here. So D4-300, D5-300. But that's where the similarities stop. So in a nutshell, well, that's actually a reflection on the glass there. Looks like I have 3 units. So in a nutshell, what you basically have are 2 external, basically hard drives. The D5-300 here, this one here has a couple of RAID modes that you can use. So you have an array of disks that behave as one giant disk, you could say. And the D4-300 doesn't have the RAID capabilities, and we'll show that here in just a little bit when we get the hard drives in there. And here's what the bottom looks like. You can see it's well ventilated to allow air to come in from the bottom and help cool your hard drives. But of course the fans on the back here are what really pull the air in from the bottom and actually through the front. There are quite a few gaps along here, and that's a good thing to allow air to be pulled in from the front. So the next step is to get the power brick plugged in. Now this is a 12 volt, let's see, 6 amp, 72 watt power supply. And then you take the hard drive trays and you attach your hard drives. And I'm using Western Digital 1 terabyte black hard drives. So after they're secured to each one of these little hard drive trays, you slide them in like that and they lock into position. So there's 1, 2, and I'll get the others swapped out. And let's see, this is number 3 and this is number 4. I already had these swapped out to save some time here. So there we have all 4 drives. Now I have to attach the USB cable to my computer, and then I will power it up. It does come with a nice handy screwdriver too in the hard drive kit. I think I forgot to point that out earlier. And we'll hit the power button there and see what happens. So all of the lights have come on. And then since these were actually the drives that came out of the D5-300, these were already formatted in the RAID that was on the D4-300. So since this is not RAID mode, the disks need to be formatted. So up here on the computer screen, I'll zoom in there, it says I need to format the disks first. So let's go ahead and do that. And that should, so there's D, F. So since it treats these as all separate disks, then it's going to ask to format each disk separately, since it considers them individual standalone disks. So we've got each disk here. So it didn't like the fact that the drives that I put in there were not really set up properly. They weren't formatted as single disks. So 2 of them it recognized, 2 of them it didn't. So I'm just pulling each one out. Of course, the first 2 were D and E, and those were okay. But I'm going to assume F and G need to be formatted, and that's what I'm doing right now through the Windows Disk Manager. So this is really not a big deal. This is very simple and easy to do. All right, so all of the disks are now formatted properly, and I formatted them in GPT mode as opposed to MBR mode. And like I said, this is just, I figured I would just try and pop them in straight out of the D5-300, and 2 of them it liked and 2 of them it didn't. But just for the record, you should always format the drives first, unless they are already formatted and have data on them. And Terra Master does state that you can do that. So now we'll go ahead and power it up and give it a moment. And then what I'll do here is go back over to my File Explorer, and I would expect to see the drive come online here. And after everything powers up, all of the lights stop flashing and all of the drives are active. And we can see here that I have a standalone D. E is actually a M.2 drive I already have, so for whatever reason it started with D. So that's the first new one, F, G, and H. So instead of D, E, F, and G, I have D, F, G, and H. They're all 1 terabyte, freshly formatted. There's no data on it right now. So what I will do is move a little data back and forth, and we'll look at some of the transfer speeds. And here I am moving about 3 to 4 gig in 2 files from my solid state drive over to the D4-300. And my transfer speeds, actually not bad. Started off a little slow, but this one kicked up. And I'll try this 2 or 3 times between each drive. And now I'm going to one of the other drives. You can see the speeds there. Now this time it started off fast, and it's staying at the same rate throughout the whole transfer. So this is pretty typical. And now I'm going from actually one of the drives to one of the other drives, both on the D4-300, and I'm getting, again, the same speed as if I go from the computer over here over to the D4-300. Let me zoom out a little bit there. So to sort of highlight it, that again, I went from the computer over here to one of the drives, and the speeds were right around 175, 180 megabytes a second. And I went to another one of the drives, got about the same speed, and then I went from one drive to one drive within the unit, and again I got about the same speed. And now I'll move that same video file from the D4-300 over to my Terra Master F2 D4-300, which is on the network. So now this data is moving through the network rather than from the computer to the D4-300. I'm actually moving stuff on the network, so a little bit of a blip there. Could be some network traffic going on. I've got a lot of stuff on my network. So we're right around 100 megabytes a second. And now we'll go from the F2-422 back to the D4-300. And we're getting about the same speeds, a little more consistent, coming from the network down here to the F4, I should say D4-300. It's easy to get all these numbers mixed up. So now I'm moving a large file from the D4-300 back to my main computer through the USB cable here. And the speeds I'm seeing are pretty consistent. Now this is a very large 90 gig file, but I'm seeing about 180, 185 megabytes a second in transfer speed, which was pretty much the speed I saw going back and forth to and from the D4-300. Here's a slide I put together to put all of the transfer speeds in one place so it's easier to compare. I think the speeds look good. They are certainly consistent, which to me that's very important. Of course you can be consistently slow, but that's not the case here. And again, I'm using Western Digital 1 terabyte black hard drives. And like I always say, your mileage will vary depending upon the brand and style of hard drive that you use. Again, these are Western Digital black 1 terabyte drives. And you can see whichever drive is being used at the time, you can see that will be the one that flashes. So right now the data is being moved from hard drive number 4, which is this one over here. And looking at the back of the unit, there are 2 cooling fans back here. And they are running now. I can feel air moving through them, but they are very quiet. But the speed will change based on the temperature. So if you're moving a lot of data and it's warm in the room, for example, your fan speed will increase to compensate for the additional heat that builds up inside the case. This unit carries a 2-year warranty. And as far as functionality, like I said, you pretty much plug it in and go. You do want to make sure you are starting with freshly formatted hard drives or hard drives that have data on them from like a Windows system, for example. Pop them in and they will be recognized and you can start moving data around immediately. So there's really nothing else to do. There's no software to set up. There's nothing to do other than plug it in. And something important to note, anytime you're storing data that's important, you don't want to keep copies of it on the same unit. For the same reason, if you have multiple drives in your computer, even if you have the stuff mirrored to another drive, if something happens to the computer, there's a flood or a fire or somebody steals it, all of your data is gone. So if you have anything important, you want to keep it on different devices that are ideally not even in the same building, if you can. That way, if something catastrophic happens, you still have a working copy of your data somewhere else. And I'll bring out the D5-300 again. So this is 5 bays D5-300, 4 bays D4-300. And again, this supports RAID. This one does not. And the pricing, of course, is a little different. The D5-300 is $269.99 with no discs. All of these come without any discs. And this guy here is $159.99. So again, the D4-300 does not have the RAID capabilities. It treats each disk separately and independently. So this is like having just multiple hard drives in one unit that you can move from computer to computer. And right now, this unit with no discs, again, these come with no discs, this is $159.99 on Amazon. So you add the cost of your hard drives, and you don't have to fill all of these. You can put 1 in there or 2 or fill all 4 slots. But you know, these drives you can get, these are 1 terabyte drives. Right now I've seen 3 and 4 terabyte drives for right around $100. So if you populated this with all of the drives at $100 a drive, so there's $400 plus $159 for the unit. So you've got $560 in a very nice system. Now, overall capacity, the system is capable of handling up to 72 terabytes. And that breaks down to putting one 18 terabyte drive in each slot. Now, you're not going to get an 18 terabyte drive right now for $100. I can certainly tell you that. But that gives you an idea of the maximum capacity that this unit can handle. Dimensions for anyone who needs to squeeze this into a shelf or a small space. You always want to leave airspace around for air circulation. But the dimensions, it's about 5¼ inches tall. It's about 9 inches in this direction, and it's about 8 inches wide. And if you're on the metric system, that translates to, get up my metric scale here, about 225 millimeters. I guess you can call that depth. For the height, we're about 135 millimeters. And across here, we are at about 205 millimeters. So for overall value and functionality and ease of setup, I would give this the Overclockers Club Editor's Choice Award. So this is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.